The Florida Panthers are seeking consistency. The Columbus Blue Jackets continue to surprise and stick around. And the Nashville Predators are finding their way and had a very, very interesting player make his NHL debut. We've got all that and more on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You could start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $250 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Florida Panthers, Armando Velez. And Mondo, man, it's been a roller coaster ride for the Panthers this year. I mean, they're doing pretty well, but consistency has been an issue. Why? What's been going on down in FLA?
Yeah, up and down with a few injuries to start the year, and for the Panthers, it just comes down to at times that they've sometimes haven't woken up for certain opponents. I mean, this homestand recently for them, just coming out of the Christmas break, and then Montreal comes to town all pumped because this is the part of the schedule where they always come to Florida and their fans come with them. So coming out of the Christmas break, having a matinee game, that's kind of hard to get yourself back mentally into it when you're with your family, eating a whole bunch of junk, whatever that may be for each of the players. And yeah, getting back to their just the focus level for them and really for the Panthers. But at the same time, they've been able to turn it on whenever they've seen a logo on the other end of a team that they faced in the last two postseasons, 10-2-0 against those teams for them. So really, it's been about just having the energy to do it through an 82 game grind, which is hard to do. That's the Palmery system there's going to be some nights where you're going to struggle to score and you're going to just keep going on the forecheck, but the chances to finish might not be there for this team sometimes.
Does the fact that they only seem to get up for certain opponents concern you at all, or do you think this team has the ability to turn it on whenever they need to turn it on?
A bit for me with the concern level. I mean, four shutouts in the month of December, and they still find themselves 2 points out of first place in the Atlantic Division. Crazy enough to think. And for the Panthers, 5-on-5 defense hasn't been the best for them this season. But thankfully, they've added a new dimension to their penalty kill now with all the shorthanded goals that they've gotten this season. Their net PK percentage is the best in the NHL. They have twice the amount of shorthanded goals in the next best team, 10. The next one has 5. So crazy to think how many cats are getting involved in the scoring on that end of the ice. So that's been something that's helped the Panthers. But the concern level for them, these are the dog days of the season for the NHL. We're just waiting to get to that next benchmark for them. Obviously, Four Nations is coming up, which the Panthers have the most representatives, and they have at least one person on each of the teams, and then the trade deadline. So it's really about trying to see what you have. And also the fact, Gil, that there are certain players who are playing up a spot, especially on the D-core for the Panthers, which they have a few injuries right now. Nico Mikkola has missed the last 3 games. Aaron Ekblad exited the last game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, didn't play in the last 6 minutes of the game, and wasn't even in practice on Sunday for the Panthers. So that's a little bit of a concern as far as the injury front for the Panthers at this current moment.
No doubt. What were your thoughts on the fine to Sam Bennett for his hit a couple of days ago?
I mean, the Panthers on Friday, they were just very out of control with their sticks. They had at least 4 stick penalties for them. So for them, it's the right call for the Panthers based on how sloppy they've been all night on that front for them. So And also it may come down to a little bit of a frustration for Sam Bennett recently. I mean, he hasn't scored a goal in more than 10 games now after an incredible start. He was leading the way for the Panthers in the contract year, and a lot of those goals were coming on the power play with so many guys out. And also Sam Bennett has been that guy to step up on power play one at times when things have been a little inconsistent on that end. Switching Carter Verhaeghe there, now Mekhi Semiskevich is there for power play one for the Panthers. Just a few weeks ago, they added Aaron Ekblad back to quarterbacking the power play when he hasn't really been played that part in the last couple of seasons. So a lot of shifting for the Panthers, and for them, Carter Verhaeghe is also on the third line, which he's also struggled to score. He's on pace for less than 20 goals this season. This is a consistent 30 goal scorer for the Panthers. So that's more of the concerns for the Panthers going on around here when it comes to just getting their scoring touch together.
Got to talk about Sam Reinhart. He has been outstanding. You mentioned the shorthanded goals. He's got 4 of them. He's also dangerous on the power play and 5-on-5. What has his play meant to this team this year with all the injuries and everything else surrounding this team?
Yeah, it's funny because the Panthers have played a total of 250 games in the last 2.5 seasons, and there's only been one person who has played in all of them, and that's been Sam Reinhart. So when you talk about most valuable player for a team, it comes down to what he brings when he is on the ice for the Panthers, and the fact that he could score shorthanded on the power play, even strength, everything with that for the Panthers. That it just goes to show just how much value he truly has to the team, and really awarded with that eight-year deal after getting the Stanley Cup clinching goal, being a constant with Alexander Barkov on that top line, even though there was a little bit of a time where he was going back with Anton Lundell to maybe spread the scoring around a little bit. But just there's just so much value with what Sam Reinhart brings to the table for just taking faceoffs on a certain end of the ice, being on that bumper position on the power play, and just and just the defensive end for him. So it just brings so much great to the table for the Cats.
You mentioned the injuries on defense right now. How does this team improve? Because defense has been the Achilles heel so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, injuries have also brought in a little bit of an opportunity. Adam Boquist hasn't necessarily played in every single game, but actually recently he has been the least of the Panthers' issues on defense for them. I think that he's been great with clearing the net front and with his 50-50 battles to at least allow the goaltenders to freeze the puck whenever there is something of high danger for them and screens in front. So I thought Adam Boquist, especially him being a right-handed shot, only one of 2 right-handed shots on the entire team, him and Ekblad, I think that he's also made the most out of his opportunities for him. I still think the Panthers will go after a right-handed shot D at the trade deadline to at least fill in that middle 6, because they have a top pair. They have one middle 6 guy, Nico Mikla, currently out, and then a whole bunch of other guys who you could mix and match here and put one on the second pair and then interchangeable on the third pair for them. So it really comes down to just opportunity and also them stepping up, because the Panthers are truly feeling the loss of Brandon Montour. I mean, they were never going to pay that contract for him, but that was going to be a little bit of the growing pains. And like I mentioned earlier, with Aaron Ekblad quarterbacking the power play, who's not as great of a skater as Montour, and then filling in that middle pair for them, that's a little bit of navigation that they're currently trying to figure out right before the deadline, which is still like just over 2 months away right now.
Any other moves besides a right shot defenseman that you expect? I mean, this team is still, as you said, battling for first place.
I think they would probably go after maybe like a middle 6 winger, someone who could also help kill penalties. Recently in their game against Montreal, I was looking a lot at a player like Joel Armia, who has some Stanley Cup experience and also can kill penalties, can fill in on that bottom line for the Panthers. Someone like that of an expiring deal that the Panthers don't have too much cap space, but we've seen that when you win over the last few years, people can also find their ways to force themselves into winning situations based on clauses in their contracts. So we've seen that so much over the last few years. We saw it with Claude Giroux, even though he was a free agent at the time. Joe Thornton was watching the Panthers Tampa Bay series when he was with the Toronto Maple Leafs. He wanted to come to Florida. And so recently Vladimir Tarasenko was the same. So we'll just see how the Panthers just continue, and the fact that they're in striking distance still for the top of the Atlantic Division, 9 to 10 points away from even the last team in for the wild card. So they're in good hands, and it's just really about keeping the focus and also seeing what you can just beef up, because there's not a lot of draft assets for the Panthers, so they're going to have to work with what they have.
All right, Armando, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
They can find me personally at MondoMan12 on X and on Blue Sky. They could follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers, and on Blue Sky at LO_FLA Panthers. No underscore there. And yeah, so you could follow me there for all my Panthers related tweets and everything else around the South Florida sports scene.
Armando, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $250 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. And hockey fans, you could also use your knowledge of the game of hockey and your favorite team to find some really exciting opportunities on the FanDuel app. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $250 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. It is great to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Blue Jackets, Jay Foster. And Jay, this Blue Jackets team, I don't think a lot of people had high expectations, and yet right now they are right in the middle of the hunt for that wild card spot in the crowded Eastern Conference. What has been the reasons that this team has been so successful despite the adversity they've faced all year?
I think there's a couple of reasons, or there's a couple of names, I should say. I think everyone, no one had really picked the Blue Jackets to make many waves this season, even before the Gaudreau tragedy happened, kind of at the end of the summer, and then after that, I think everyone was like, man, this team might be worse than the expansion era Washington Capitals, who I believe won 8 games total. Blue Jackets are better than that. I still don't know if they're a playoff team necessarily, but they are an improved team in basically every single metric from last season, which is honestly kind of impressive considering when you look at the roster this year versus last year. A couple of reasons for this. Number one is that Zach Werenski is playing like he is a top 3 defenseman in the entire league. I think the only defensemen that have better underlying metrics than him right now are Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar. Quinn Hughes out injured at the minute, so he's going to get Norris votes if he keeps this up. He's currently on pace, I think, for 85 to 90 points this season, which as a defenseman is wild. And the other thing is Sean Monahan has been such a revelation for this team. He's leading forwards in scoring, I believe. Him and Krolmachenko, who has been surgically attached to Monahan since he arrived. Since December 23rd, I believe Sean Monahan is actually leading the NHL. He's got 15 points in his last, I think, 7 or 8 games. He's been incredible for this team. And obviously, the Gaudreau loss is awful and sad and terrible. This feels like the best possible place for him to be. And it's been really, really nice seeing him smile over the past couple of months. It looks like he's having fun, and no one would have blamed him if he looked like he was being tortured the entire season, but he's coming to work, he's smiling, he's playing well. And I think that's lifted the Blue Jackets up a lot, because if he can do it, then why can't they?
Makes sense. Goals against have been a problem all season. Is this a goalie problem, a team defense problem, or a combination of the two?
Yeah, a little of column A, a little of column B. The goaltending has been improved on last season. It's still not really where the team needs it to be. It's not where I wanted the goaltending to be, you know, and I think we've talked about this on this show before, which is they don't need a Vezina level goalie. The team is good enough, I think, to put up with average goaltending. Unfortunately, right now, they're not getting average goaltending. Elvis is inconsistent. He was great last night until he wasn't. You know, you get 2 great games out of Elvis, and then you get 2 terrible games out of Elvis. The backup, Daniil Tarasov, has been almost unplayably bad most of the season. He played 1 game at the end of December. That was his first game in the entire month of December, I believe. And he allowed 4 goals on about 25 shots. So he didn't really do a lot to help his case. So, like, the goaltending isn't where they need it to be, which is the main thing. The other thing is, and this has improved actually in the last kind of little bit of games, is that for a minute there, the penalty kill was just atrocious. Like, they set an NHL record for number of games allowing a power play goal in a row. I think they allowed a power play goal in like 14 straight games or something insane like that. So like that's picked up a little bit. They're no longer bleeding short man advantage goals, but this is a team that, like, when you look at the goals that they're scoring, they should be way higher in goal differential than they are right now. And that's a problem because they're scoring a lot of goals, but they're also allowing a lot of goals, which is like it's not going to win you a lot of games if you're scoring, you know, if you're scoring 4 goals every game but allowing 5, like, not ideal.
Not ideal at all. Do you think they try to address that somehow before the trade deadline, whether it's a defenseman, a goalie, a defensive forward?
I don't think so. Like, I wouldn't. I find Don Waddell's moves difficult to predict sometimes, whether that's just because I'm used to, like, you know, we had a long stretch of, oh, well, Jarmo Kekalainen is going to do this because that's what he's done every year for 8 years or whatever. So I find it more difficult to predict what Don Waddell is going to do. I do think that for better or worse, this is just kind of what the team is right now. I don't think Elvis's contract is particularly movable. I don't think Tarasov's contract is particularly movable right now. My guess is that he maybe goes on waivers, and if they lose him, then they lose him. So I don't see them getting an upgrade in goalie during the season. This feels like a summer thing. And I think that was always going to be the case. You know, they really wanted to see, okay, can they get Elvis back up to the level that he was at for his first couple of seasons in the league? And again, some nights he looks great, and some nights he looks not so great. So it's a tough one. Defensemen, I think, again, they're kind of pretty set with where they are. I think they'd love to upgrade if they could, but they're already carrying 8 defensemen. And they've been actually rolling with 11 forwards and 7 defensemen for the past 4 or 5 games, just because they've liked how that's been going. Forwards, I think they'd love to add a top 6 winger, whether that's a defensive forward or not. But I think as of right now, this team is probably going to be a seller at the deadline. I don't think it's worth buying at the deadline right now. But things can change. We're a month and a half away from the deadline. So, you know, we'll talk. But for better or worse, I think this is what the team is going to look like. Which is not the worst thing in the world. Like, they're in the hunt for a wild card spot right now. I believe they are at 40 points on the season, which is the same amount of points as the Ottawa Senators, who currently hold the second wild card spot, but the Senators have games in hand on them. So big couple of weeks for the Blue Jackets. If teams like, you know, the Penguins, teams like the Senators start to fall off a little bit, then we could be having a very different conversation. But right now, my guess is that the Blue Jackets are probably going to sell at the deadline and start preparing for next year. This year was never going to be about winning. It was about seeing what you have and what you still need to add.
This team is 13-5-3 at home, 4-12-3 on the road. Any reasons for the split, and how can they improve away from home?
I mean, mostly I think it's just that hockey is voodoo sometimes, because I genuinely, and this is a question that I've been asking myself on my show, Locked On Blue Jackets, for basically the entire season, which is, how is this team so good at Nationwide, and then they go on the road and it looks like a different team, and I truly, genuinely don't understand it. Like, again, it kind of goes back to your big players are scoring at home and not on the road, and I don't know how you address that because I don't think they're playing differently. It's the same players, it's the same systems, it's the same goaltending, it's the same coaching. Like, it's not like they're saying, well, we need to play differently because we're on the road. So I got nothing. I wish I had an answer because then at least someone might have an answer. But right now, it just, for whatever reason, whether it's the crowds, whether it's like just some kind of, again, weird nationwide voodoo magic that happens in all hockey rinks. But it is by far the most frustrating part of the season is just how good this team is at home versus on the road. Like, they have, I think, the third best power play in the NHL when they're at home. And then I think they're 16th or 17th, maybe even lower, like league wide. So when you add the away power play into it, it tanks it. So I got nothing. Sean Monahan loves to score at home. Zach Werenski has like a 15-game home point streak rolling right now. They just, when they go on the road, it falls apart. And it's, again, like I said, it is by far the most frustrating part of the season is watching this team play on the road.
Hard to believe having last change would have that big an impact on a team,
Yeah, exactly. Like, if that's what it is, then it's wild. How have we not adjusted for that yet? But there's something there. I just don't think anyone's figured quite what that something is yet.
Well, we have half a season left to try to figure that out. Jay, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media?
So you can find the show anywhere you get Locked On NHL. We're free on all podcasting apps. We're over on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find me over on Blue Sky, same handle without the underscore. You can find the show on Twitter, not Blue Sky yet, at LO_Blue Jackets. And honestly, despite the frustration, the vibes are pretty good for the Blue Jackets right now. So come and hang out, and we'll have some fun.
All right, Jay, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Go.
Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, that definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Predators and Kimmel. And it's been a little better for the Predators after a very rough start. What has been the big difference over the last 5 or 6 games, especially where they're starting to play a little bit more cohesively?
Well, there was nowhere to go but up, Gil, because the season was really, really a rough start for the Nashville Predators. But I think the thing that is making the biggest difference in them finally finding a little bit of a groove is that their best players have started playing like they are their best players. And that was really a struggle in the start. Of course, they added Jonathan Marchessault. They added Steven Stamkos to the roster in the offseason, but it took Marchessault and Stamkos a long time to really get up to speed, to understand the system, to build some chemistry. What you're seeing now is that chemistry finally translating into some success on the ice for them. Jonathan Marchessault in his last 12 games has 9 goals and 16 points. In his first 12 games of the season, he only had 2 goals and 7 points. Very similar numbers for Steven Stamkos. Right now, his last 12 games, he's averaging a point per game. In those first 12 games of the season, he only had 5 points. So you are finding the back of the net. They are finding chemistry. They mixed up the lines a little bit, and I think that sort of clicked as well. So when your best players are playing better, the whole team is elevated, and then everybody else can sort of follow suit. That has been their biggest struggle. I think they're slowly starting to figure that out.
And how, if at all, has the mood around this team changed?
It's been really interesting to watch this season, a little bit painful at times to watch because earlier in the season, they came in with high expectations and, of course, did not even come close to reaching those. And at one point through the stretch of losses and the struggle to kind of build chemistry, Jonathan Marchessault referred to the locker room as a little bit fragile. And it really was an honest assessment of where this locker room was. And you have veterans who have won Stanley Cups like Marchessault, like Stamkos, like Ryan O'Reilly. And all of those guys who have been so successful over the course of their career really were wrestling with, why isn't this working? I think going through that struggle and finding some success on the other side has really changed the locker room. It's much more upbeat. They're also adding some new players. Barry Trotz has added some pieces, but he's also recalling some players from the AHL who are making NHL debuts and are trying to see how they fit into the NHL program. And that brings a certain energy as well. So I think a combination of things and just finally being able to get some wins has helped a lot. Now they just need to add consistency in their winning.
That's the next step, obviously. Were you surprised Marchessault dropped the gloves against Calgary?
You know what is so funny? Jonathan Marchessault is a delightful person to cover, but he has an aura. I refer to him as like the Fonz. You don't really ever see Arthur Fonzarelli on Happy Days fight, but you know he's going to start the jukebox punch. And that's sort of Jonathan Marchessault. Like, you know he's tough, don't poke the bear. But we saw what happens when you poke the bear, and not much, doesn't have a big history of fighting in the NHL because I just think he has an aura of don't touch me. But he can. And I have to tell you, his teammates were thrilled. They were thrilled to see it.
Yeah, and it was inspirational in the win over Calgary. So
yeah,
more credit to Marchessault for inspiring his teammates in an unconventional way.
Yeah.
So now there was a recent, you talked about some players making their NHL debuts. There was a recent one, and it was a rather unique story. Talk to me about Ozzy Wiesblatt.
Oh, this is such a great story, such a great player. Ozzy Wiesblatt made his NHL debut Friday night in Vancouver. That's the city he was born in. He played his second NHL game Saturday night in Calgary, the city in which he was raised. This is a really neat story. He is one of 5 siblings. He has 4 brothers. There are 4 boys and a girl. And Ozzy was born to parents who were deaf. And so when he was born, his first language and his siblings' first language was, of course, American Sign Language. And they were very fluent in that. But as the children got a little bit older, his mom, Kim, wanted them to develop socialization and, of course, to develop their speech. And she found sports was a great way to do that. So first they tried soccer, and then they just are natural athletes in this family. And so someone said, you need to try hockey. And Kim said, okay, hockey is too expensive. Well, they tried it out, and they are a very successful hockey family. All 4 boys play hockey at some level. And on Friday night, Ozzy Wiesblatt made his NHL debut. His mom, Kim, and 2 of his brothers and a sister got to see him make his NHL debut. And it was so great, not only just because of his interesting background story, but this is a player who has worked really, really hard to develop his game. His game is very physical, and he told us in training camp, part of that comes from the fact that he is one of 4 boys, and they played roller hockey in the backyard, and all rules were gone. So it just developed into a very physical player. He's also a really great offensive player. And so he was somebody who got to make that NHL debut. And it was just really exciting for everybody who knows him. And it was exciting for the team to get a look at his talent as well.
Do you think he'll stay up for the rest of the season, or what is his short-term future looking like?
That's such an interesting question with where the Nashville Predators are, because I think part of what we are going to see through the remainder of the season for the Predators is Barry Trotz checking out the talent that he has in the AHL. I would not be surprised to see some more games for Ozzy Wiesblatt. Even if he is sent back to Milwaukee, I wouldn't be surprised if he is recalled again at other points in the season. I think Barry Trotz wants to get an eye on what he has in Milwaukee that is close to NHL ready and to see where they're at.
That makes sense. So how does the team approach the second half? And look, the playoffs are obviously a long shot this year. It would take one heck of a streak to get them back into it. But who might be available at the trade deadline, and how do you think they'll approach that?
This is the $1,000,000 question. Right now, the Nashville Predators have very similar odds to make the first round of the playoffs or to get the first overall pick in the draft, which is not where they thought that they were going to be. And you already see Barry Trotz making some decisions based on what has happened in the first half of the season. He's making some cap space. I think the move to trade Alexander Carrier for Justin Barron with the Montreal Canadiens, that was really a cap space move. So that Barry Trotz is really looking to the future to see what he has going. I would not be surprised to see some other players available for trade. Nashville right now has a lot of depth, especially younger depth defensively. Name that we have heard in previous seasons that teams have been interested in is somebody like Jeremy Lauzon. So that may be somebody that Barry Trotz takes some calls about as well. So I think that there are some players that he would be willing to deal at the trade deadline. Of course, there are a lot of contracts on this roster that are not movable. So I think he's going to maybe move some pieces if he can. I also do think he wants to see what he has in the cupboard in Milwaukee. So we're going to see some more of those young players. He is making cap space. I wouldn't be surprised if he does do a little buying for a longer term piece as well. So that's something that we're keeping a close eye on. Names like Dylan Cousins has come up here in Nashville as well. So we're keeping an eye on that to see if Barry Trotz is maybe going to try to make a long-term move and also maybe move some pieces out as well.
I know it will be an interesting second half, and where the team goes after this year will be even more interesting because they are kind of at a crossroads right now. And why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast, where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
Absolutely. So you can find us on your favorite podcasting platform. Of course, Locked On Predators is also on YouTube. My co-host Emma Lingen is a writer for the Hockey News. You can find her work there. You can find my work with Penalty Box Radio as well.
All right. And thank you so much.
Thanks.
I want to thank my guests today. I want to thank Armando Velez of Locked On Florida Panthers, Jacob Foster of Locked On Blue Jackets, and Ann Kimmel of Locked On Predators for joining me today. I'm Gil Martin. I host the Monday edition of Locked On NHL, and I co-host the Friday edition along with Rachel Donner. Don't forget, we're here every day, Monday through Friday, bringing you the biggest stories from around the National Hockey League. I want to thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from our hosts, Steele and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Have a great day, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.